Should you remove the silver skin from your brisket? For years we've been told that we need to remove the thin layer of silver skin from the bottom of our briskets because it doesn't render and it doesn't allow seasoning and smoke to penetrate into the meat. But do you really need to remove the silver skin, or are we just wasting our time? That's what we're gonna find out in this video, so let's get smoking. Welcome to the Smoke Lab, guys. I'm Steve Gow, and on this show I do crazy barbecue experiments you would never do at home so you can learn from my trial and error. Silverskin, what is it? Well, it's a thin collagen sheath that surrounds the muscle of a brisket. In particular, we really notice it on the bottom of the brisket, on the flat muscle, because it's so visible. And the common wisdom that we've all heard is that you need to remove it because it doesn't render during the cook, it's going to shrink up and squeeze a lot of moisture out of the brisket, and it doesn't let smoke and seasoning penetrate through to the meat. So we better remove it or our brisket is going to be ruined. Personally, I always removed it because I always heard that same advice and I never thought to actually test it for myself. But then I got into competition barbecue, and competition barbecue involves trimming off the entire fat cap off a brisket. And when I started doing that, I noticed, hey, there's also silver skin on top of the brisket between the meat and the fat cap. We just never see it because it's under the fat cap. So how come that silver skin that we don't cut off fully renders and allows seasoning to penetrate through, and it's good silver skin, but the stuff on the bottom is bad and we have to remove it? I think you guys can see where I'm going with this. The whole removing the silver skin thing seems like another barbecue BS myth to me. But is it, or should we in fact remove that silver skin to produce a better brisket? To find out, I'm gonna conduct an experiment where I cook a brisket with the silver skin left on one brisket, and I'm gonna fully remove all the silver skin off of the bottom of another brisket, and we'll see which one turns out better. I'm starting with two choice grade briskets. One of them has more silver skin than the other, so I'll use that one as the experimental brisket, and I'll use this one as the control brisket where I remove all of the silver skin. To do that, I'm poking my knife under the silver skin and slicing it off carefully. Usually a little bit of meat will come off with it, but that's totally okay. And here's the bottom of the brisket with all of the silver skin removed, nice and clean. Now, moving on to the experimental brisket, I'm just going to trim it normally, but when I flip it over, I'm not going to remove any of that silver skin at all. It's staying on, and I'm applying my Smoke Trails BBQ brisket rub directly over top of it, using some soy sauce as a binder. I'm rubbing the top as well, then moving on to the control brisket that has the silver skin removed, and I'm doing the same thing. Soy sauce, rub on the bottom, more soy sauce on the top, and more rub on the top. Then I'm leaving it on the counter for an hour while I go light up the pit. I'm lighting up my Oklahoma Joe's Longhorn offset smoker with my Oklahoma Joe's charcoal lighter. I just throw some splits in there, I light them up, and I let them burn down to get a good charcoal bed started. Then I add really small splits every 20 minutes or so to maintain my desired temperature. This guy's smoking away and nicely preheated, so it's time to throw some briskets on. Both briskets are now going on the Longhorn with the points towards the firebox. The one with the toothpick in it is the experimental brisket with all of the silver skin left on the bottom. And I'm gonna smoke these big boys at 250 degrees for the next 4 to 5 hours until they hit 140 degrees internal, and then I'm gonna bump temperatures up to 300 until they hit around 170 internal. 8 to 9 hours in, the briskets are around 170 degrees internal, so I'm doing something a little bit different in this cook. Usually I foil boat my briskets, but I'm going to do a classic Texas crutch here, fully wrapping the briskets in foil, but switching it up a little bit and poking a few holes in the bottom so the juices don't fill up the wrap and braise and steam the brisket too much. I find if that happens, then the brisket starts to take on a little bit of a overcooked pot roasty taste and washes out a lot of the natural beef flavors. Around 2 to 3 hours later, the briskets are probing at 195 internal, so this is about 11 or 12 hours into the cook. This is where I usually like to pull them, so I'm unwrapping them and leaving them on the smoker at 300 degrees for another 30 minutes or so, just to dry out the bark a little bit before I wrap them again. Now, while I'm waiting for that to happen, I'm laying down some tallow and ghee on aluminum foil sheets. Really, any kind of fat will do for this. Then I'm wrapping the briskets tightly and putting them in my holding oven overnight at 150 degrees for the next 18 to 20 hours, basically until dinner the next day. All right, guys, it's the next day, and we have both briskets here. I have the control brisket, the one that I removed all the silver skin on my right, your left, and here I have an upside down experimental brisket with all of the silver skin left on. We're gonna compare the bottoms of both of these briskets. I'm gonna flip this one over, and we're gonna see if removing the silver skin made a difference or not. I'm gonna note before we get into this that these briskets aren't totally up to my expectations. I usually like to have a little bit more fat cap rendering, a little bit more fat rendering. I like to take the briskets to a higher internal temperature. I had to take them off a little bit lower last night because I was in a hurry, and I used the Texas Crutch to speed things up because I had 2 huge briskets on a smaller offset smoker. I probably should have budgeted around 16 hours total for this cook yesterday, but I only had around 11 hours. It's important to keep in mind though that barbecue doesn't always turn out the way that we want it to. It doesn't always come out perfect every time. It's always a journey and a learning experience. And although I'm being overly critical of myself right now, I think when I serve this up to my friends and family, they're gonna love it. They're not even gonna notice the difference. And a lot of it is just in my head. I did meet the goal yesterday of finishing my briskets on time, getting some sleep, putting my kids to bed, not being up till 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, getting these briskets done. That's not sustainable for me. So I got these briskets done. I think they're gonna be high quality. They might not be up to my usual standards, but they're still gonna be good. Okay, let's flip this brisket over and we'll check out the Silverskin. So this one right here is the one where we removed all the silver skin, and this is the one where we left the silver skin on the very tip of the flat. So this is the no silver skin brisket. You can see how it's very uniform. It looks very nice. And when I touch it here, I mean, there's no silver skin coming off it at all. It's just meat. So not much to say about that one. Now let's take a look at the silver skin brisket. Here's all the silver skin, and I can kind of just pull it right off actually. It just comes off, and there it is. And look at that, guys. Now, if you go by the common advice that you gotta remove the silver skin because it doesn't render, well, let me show you this, guys. It just pulls apart like it's nothing. It's fully rendered. It's gelatinous. All of that collagen has rendered. It's nice and tender. There's no difference between this collagen on the bottom of the brisket and all of the collagen in the middle of the brisket and on top of the brisket. It's all the same. Let's take a little bit more off so you guys can see it here. I mean, it just peels off. It peels off, and normally this would end up on the slice. But look at this. It just pulls apart like it's nothing. And what does it taste like? It tastes like rendered collagen. It's gooey. There's some fat on it. It's really delicious. It probably tastes better than just this plain meat on this brisket where we removed all the silver skin. So this is tasting actually pretty good. So I think we've debunked the myth that you have to remove the silver skin. I think it's almost better with the silver skin left on. Now, what about the theory that the silver skin contracts during the cooking and it causes the moisture of the brisket to squeeze out more so than if you didn't have any silver skin? Well, I weighed the briskets before and after cooking, and they lost exactly the same amount of weight. They each lost 41% of their initial weight, so I don't think there's any merit to that theory. But what if the silver skin caused the tip of the flat to be more likely to curl up, which as brisket cooks, we don't really like that much? Well, I found that during this cook, I didn't really get any additional flat curling on the brisket that had the silver skin when compared to the brisket that didn't have the silver skin. So I don't know if there's anything to that theory either. But enough talking, let's cut into this brisket and we'll see if my worries are going to be valid or if I'm just over worrying about how good these briskets are gonna be or how bad they're gonna be. Let's take a look at this. Guys, oh, this looks pretty dang good. Looks pretty dang good. I think I was worried over nothing actually. Yeah, that looks money. Get some tallow on that bad boy. Okay, let's get some slices off of here. Get that for burnt. Well, that's just a big old chunk of fat. That's a big chunker of fat. Let's get a few slices off here. Actually, that's a decent slice. I like the look of that one. Look at that. That's a beautiful looking slice. Let's see how it pulls apart. Is it gonna be tough, like I'm worried about? No, not really. It's got a little bit of tug to it, but otherwise, it's pretty good. Ho, ho, ho. That's actually way better than I thought it would be. Could have used a little bit more rendering in the point, but it's still good. And guys, I was worried about the fat cap rendering too, but it's rendered all the way down. It's beautiful. It's a thing of beauty. That's money. Money, money, money. Now, what about the flat? Let's take a look at the flat here. It's actually, again, looking quite nice. Pulls apart really easily. Tasty. Really good. Yeah, I got no complaints about that, actually. This one I am kind of worried about because it was feeling a little bit tougher than the last one. It'll probably still be edible though. Take a look at that. Mmm, yum, 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 yum. Get rid of this thing. I'll give you guys a look. Again, that's looking really nice. Let's pull it apart. Moment of truth. It's a little bit tight. So this one, the other one was perfect. This one, it's a little bit under. Still really good. I think by the time I slice all of these slices up and I either reheat them on another day or I just put them in my oven for a few hours on super low until dinner, they're gonna be perfect by the time I serve them up. So I'm actually not too worried about this one. I mean, I could have spent an extra 4 hours last night to get a perfect result, but this is pretty good and I got an extra 4 hours of sleep. And let's check out the flat on this guy. I always do that. Okay, take a look at that. We're gonna pull it apart. It actually pulls apart really nicely. Mmm. This flat is better than the other flat because I pull it at a lower temperature, and whenever I pull it at a lower temperature and hold it overnight, the flat and the point just tastes really beefy, prime ribby, almost like steak texture. It's got the sweetness of the beef that hasn't been washed out by overcooking it. I really like that texture for the flat. The point usually needs a little bit more in terms of temperature and rendering to get that ooey gooey texture though. But this flat is delish. So to recap, should you remove the silver skin on the bottom of your briskets? No, it's a waste of time. Don't do it. In fact, leaving it on makes the brisket taste better and probably helps the brisket retain more moisture because we have that barrier on top of the meat on the bottom of the flat. And once that collagen in the silver skin all renders down with the spices on top of it, it creates this really nice texture and it's ooey gooey in the mouth. So keep the silver skin on, it saves you time and it creates a better tasting brisket. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you have any ideas for future Smoke Lab experiments, let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to the Oklahoma Joe's YouTube channel. I will see you in the next video, and until then, happy smoking.